We always hear about this island called Numenor in Lord of the Rings, where Aragorn's ancestors and the kings of Gondor in Arnor are originally descended from. And we find out that this island has multiple names. It's called Andor, the land of gift, or Elena, Starward, Numenore, Anadune, the land of the west, fairly. And what we find out is that this land was gifted to the men of the First Age who fought against the first Dark Lord Morgoth. And they're kind of removed from Middle Earth because this place exists between the Undying Lands and Middle Earth in what's called the Sundering Seas. The Belagair Seas is what they're called in The Lord of the Rings. And it is there that there are five promontories and that the island is in like a star shape. And in the center is a giant mountain that have like five pillars to it that kind of jut out in the direction of each promontory. The mountain is called Menel Tarma, the Pillars of Heaven, and below it are its roots called the Tarma Sundar, the roots of the pillar. In that area in the center, it is called the Middlemar. Pretty much just translates to like middle lands fairly. But this is where like the most dense population of Numenor was, because this is near Armenelos, where the Tower of the King was, and is also near Romena. If you watch The Rings of Power, most of the story happens here. Not only that, there is Nordinan. This is an area near the pillars of the mountain that is like the Valley of Kings, where the kings are buried. Now, looking at each point, in the far north, where there is the North Cape, there is Fortistar, Northlands. That's what that means. And one of the more prominent, like, things in that area is a tower made by Tar Meneldor, who loved to look at the stars. It was built on this kind of like mountainous area called Sorantil. Now, to the west, this is where Aragorn's ancestors are actually from, the lords of Andunie. And in that little small corner more north of Andustar, land of the west, there is the Bay of Andunie, and of course Andunie proper. But below it is another area, and it's the Bay of Eldana, where it has one of the more rich areas where it was like filled with scented trees and plants and fruits. And it's called Eldalande the Green. And also in that area is a place called Nisemeldar, the trees of scent it is called. Now there is a river, two rivers that flow in Numenor, and one of those rivers flow out to that bay that I just mentioned, and it's called the Nandunie. There is another river that goes north to south, or at least from the Middlemar down to the southern portion of Numenor. But in the southwest, there is a place called Hiranustar. This area is the southwest lands. That's what that means. And it is there are rich vineyards, but there are cliffy areas and so forth. So there's not a lot of beach access there. But if you look at the center south of the island of Numenor, there is an area where the river Cyril flows out to the ocean. And it's there where there are a lot of fishing ports and towns, but there is a major port town that exists there that probably is providing a good amount of the food to the rest of the Numenorians from the sea. It's called Nindamos, and it's not really mentioned in a lot of the major stories in of Numenor and Lord of the Rings. In the southeast is Hararostar, southeast lands. This is more of a forested area filled with tons of timber. And you don't really hear too much about it, at least not so much. You do hear about it a little bit in the story of Tar al Daryan and like him being the Lord of the Forest and like replanting it during his time of making ships to go to Middle Earth. Now, east is Orostar. This is the Eastlands. This is probably one of the areas we hear about a lot of because this is the Firth of Romena. Romena is like the area where a lot of the ports and ships went out from Numenor. There is a very specific island in this bay called Tol Uinen. This is where the Guild of Venturers, the individuals of Numenor who wanted to venture out into the sea, like Tar al Daryan, this is where they resided and met as well as left from. Now, I want to mention that near the Middlemar, the Middlelands, there is a place a bit to the west of it. It's called Emory. It is like a sheep grass herding location where the wife of Tar al Daryan is from. Her name is Orendis, is where she resides for a good majority of their story. But these are the major features of Numenor, and it's kind of interesting how the islands kind of devised this way. But not only that, a lot of the population doesn't exist in certain areas. A lot of these areas are very rocky or just not very, populated. Most of the population actually exists in the center of the island, or at least a little to the east, near Armenelos and Romena being the port area of Armenelos. People live obviously in Andunie and of course Eldolande the Green. There's a lot of people living there as well, but we don't really hear too much about that. But we do know that the Eldar, when they visit Numenor in its early history, come to this area here in Andustar, the land of the West. This is where, like, the lords of Andunie really befriend the Eldar and kind of foster what is known as the faithful individuals who still follow the Valar and the ways of the Eldar. It is also where probably, the Eldar gave the Seeing Stones to the lords of Andunie. But let me know what you think. I love Numenor. It's a very intriguing location, and there's a lot of rich history to it that we don't really get to hear about even in the Silmarillion. This all comes from like things like the Unfinished Tales, for example. But let me know what you think in the comments.